My 30F husband, 30M, and I are increasingly busy and growing frustrated with each other. How can we navigate this? I apologize for the length of this message, and since English is not my first language, I apologize in advance for any typographical errors. This is my first time posting here. A summary can be found at the end. My husband, 30M, and I, 30F, have been together for over 10 years and were married 2 years ago. We do not have any children. Both of us have established careers, our values align, we rarely argue, and I believe it's fair to say that we make a very effective team. We come from vastly different backgrounds, both culturally and in terms of privilege and childhood experiences. I have endured significant trauma and had to unlearn many of my previous thoughts about love, such as the notions that love is not conditional, and that I am deserving of it, and learn to express my feelings if something bothers me, rather than suppressing them. In contrast, my husband was raised in a stable environment, enjoying many privileges I did not have, such as having 2 parents, 3 meals a day, opportunities to travel, being constantly reassured of his love, and never facing threats to his safety or well-being. Despite these differences, our lives are highly compatible, and we continue to grow as a couple each year. My husband is incredibly kind. He is loyal, honest, genuine, respectful, confident yet humble, enjoys making me laugh, and overall he provides me with a sense of security. My journey with love is still something I am navigating, but I am confident that I love him, and I believe he loves me as well. My concern is that he never, ever compliments me. Since I gathered the courage to express my desires more openly, I have told him on several occasions that I wish he would offer compliments, whether on my outfit or my makeup. While I receive compliments from strangers when I am out and about, those remarks do not hold any significance for me. My friends also compliment me on days when I look particularly nice. I just wish he would tell me he finds me attractive. When I address this with him, he insists that he finds me very appealing and that his friends often tell him that I am out of his league, which I wholeheartedly disagree with. He is genuinely handsome and possesses many wonderful qualities. It took me considerable time to express these feelings to him, as I thought it was a normal issue, and perhaps I was asking for too much. It stings that I finally opened up about it, revealing how sad it makes me that he does not compliment me, and despite that, nothing has changed. He claims he is not good at giving compliments and that it does not come naturally to him. I understand that, but it still hurts. He also does not frequently tell me he loves me, although he has become more verbal about it in the past few months since I made it part of our daily routine. He is aware of my upbringing and how I lacked those affirmations, yet it does not motivate him to make more effort. I am also guilty in some ways. Over the past year or two, he has expressed that he wishes I would initiate intimacy more often. Unfortunately, I struggle significantly with intimacy, which I continue to grapple with. I find it quite challenging to let go in the bedroom and often find myself lost in my thoughts. This is one of the reasons I struggle with foreplay. It extends the time spent in an intimate setting. We still engage in foreplay and have sex, but not as frequently as he would prefer, perhaps 2 to 3 times a month. I truly enjoy foreplay and sex once we are involved, but my mind is often consumed with worries. For comfort, I usually keep the lights off or dimmed, even though I objectively understand that my body is appealing. I also rarely allow him to perform oral sex on me because I feel vulnerable and self-conscious, despite my enjoyment of it and his enthusiasm as well. The idea of initiating intimacy feels overwhelming to me, and I recognize that this is not a valid excuse. I very rarely reject him when he makes the first move, but it has occurred, and I know it pains him. There have been instances where he has become more persistent and frustrated, which has led me to feel guilty about declining and ultimately giving in. The last time this happened was during a trip over the summer. I did not want to dampen his mood. I ended up crying toward the end, but I concealed my feelings from him. I do not view this as sexual assault, as I genuinely could have said a firm no, and he would have eventually come to terms with it. I recognize that my fear of conditional love is a contributing factor. I have previously addressed my intimacy issues with my therapist, but due to our discussions covering numerous topics, I did not get the chance to revisit this before I stopped seeing her. My husband genuinely wants me to find a solution. He tells me he understands, but it genuinely frustrates him that I do not take the initiative. I have suggested that if he could be more intimate with me in contexts unrelated to sex, such as holding my hand while we are out, giving unexpected kisses, cuddling, or paying me compliments, it might help lessen my anxiety around intimacy. As it stands, he typically only touches me in sexual contexts. I have made these suggestions multiple times, yet for some reason he struggles to try. More recently, he admitted he had been thinking about it and realized it was unfair for me to place the entire burden of resolving this issue on him. I agree with him. However, he has not even attempted to address it, and I believe both of us should be making an effort. I proposed that we consult a sexologist, but I have yet to find someone who is accepting new patients. Additionally, I want to point out that he becomes mildly frustrated with me because I am quite disorganized. I can be messy at times, just as he can, and I tend to work excessively. I have a diagnosis of ADHD, and while it may not serve as a sufficient excuse, it genuinely complicates my working situation, resulting in longer hours for me. My husband has difficulty understanding why I struggle with certain tasks at work, and he often offers suggestions instead of genuinely listening. Our professional fields differ significantly, making it challenging for him to see things from my perspective. While I consistently express my admiration for his hard work, his talent, and his exhaustion from his demanding job, he seems unable to acknowledge my efforts. I feel as though he does not take pride in my accomplishments. Instead, I sense that I am being blamed or scolded for my challenges at work, which is partly deserved given my poor time management and planning, which ultimately lead to my own setbacks. I believe he is becoming increasingly frustrated with me due to all these factors. We had one of our rare arguments yesterday, in which he communicated that he feels I do not prioritize him or our relationship due to my constant work commitments, and he perceives that I do not support him sufficiently during this busy period in his life. Although I technically have more flexibility to adjust my schedule than he does, it is not as straightforward, and I have been quite busy as well, something I do not think he fully understands. I keep reflecting on the situation and feel as though there is something I am missing or that we are not aligned in our perspectives. We are both falling short in our efforts, but I feel as if he is only focusing on my part in this issue. My question is, how can I support him while also helping him recognize that I am struggling too? He has difficulty expressing his emotions, and during our conversation yesterday, I could clearly see that he is hurting and struggling because of me. I sometimes wonder if he would be more affectionate and generally happier if I were to conquer my fear of initiating intimacy. For those who have experienced similar challenges, what has helped you? How did you learn to speak the same language? My husband and I typically communicate effectively. We are also open to couples therapy. Summary: we have a stable and solid relationship after 10 years together, but my husband will not give me compliments despite my repeated requests. I do not initiate intimacy due to intimacy issues, which bothers him significantly. He feels frustrated that I do not support him while he is busy, but I am struggling too. What can we do aside from communicating? What has worked for others in a similar situation? Story 2. Confusing, talking stage, 23M, 24F, or whatever this was left me feeling a bit confused and pathetic. I am a 23-year-old male who met a 24-year-old female named S in my master's program, and she was the one who approached me first. At that point, she had recently experienced a breakup, although she never suggested that she was not open to something new. Our relationship quickly became playful and close, characterized by teasing, deep conversations, and what seemed to be mutual interest. She frequently made suggestive jokes, praised my appearance, and we engaged in lengthy late-night text chats. However, her behavior grew increasingly unpredictable. Some days she would go out of her way to initiate conversations with me, displaying warmth and interest. Other days, she would appear distant and aloof, hardly acknowledging my presence. There were times when it seemed she wanted to remain close, but then there were moments when she appeared to be intentionally distancing herself. I couldn't decipher what she truly desired, and it was driving me crazy. One complicating factor was Jay, a 30-year-old male in our program, who never seemed fond of me. According to S, Jay had mentioned that he liked almost everyone in the program except for me. I hardly interacted with him, so I never really understood his issue, but it was evident he was not a fan of mine, and I noticed him making subtle jabs at me. It was also apparent that he was flirting with S simultaneously. Then, one night at a bar with friends, S sat on Jaitik's lap, which shocked me. However, since my intentions were casual, it did not bother me excessively, although it did annoy me considering how he treated me. It felt inappropriate given how she acted around me, but I tried not to dwell on it, so I figured I would just accept the situation and not take it personally. Shortly after that night, she sent me a message that felt like a rejection. I am sometimes too friendly to people in ways that I don't intend. I interpreted it at face value and assumed she was no longer interested, so I decided to pursue something with Jay instead. I began to treat her solely as a platonic friend, thinking I had misread the situation, and that her flirtatious behavior might have simply been part of her personality rather than any genuine interest in me. I stepped back and mentally moved on, viewing our interactions as strictly friendly and starting to see her more as a close friend. Not long after that, we had a phone call in which she mentioned that Jay made an advance on her that night, which left her feeling uncomfortable, and that she had decided to distance herself from him. During that same call, she unexpectedly revealed that she had considered sleeping with me at one point, and that she was attracted to shorter guys. I am below average height, and while I won't specify my ethnicity, men of my background are generally perceived as quite unattractive. This revelation completely contradicted what I had believed to be a rejection and left me bewildered. Why would she say that if she were not interested? I had already begun adjusting my mindset away from thinking of her romantically, so I chose to overlook her comment. However, in retrospect, it feels as though it was deliberately intended to confuse my understanding of our relationship. For context, we had also discussed my insecurities regarding dating and why Jay seemed to dislike me. I thought she mentioned this to reassure me as a friend at that point. Later, we engaged in a text conversation where she clarified that her previous message had not, in fact, been a rejection. Instead, she claimed she sent it because she was concerned that she appeared too flirtatious with Jay and wanted to establish boundaries, not because she was uninterested in me. This completely flipped my interpretation of the situation. For weeks, I had assumed she was signaling that she no longer viewed me in a romantic light, but now she was suddenly asserting the opposite. It felt like my instincts had been right all along and that there had been a connection between us, but now everything was muddled with unnecessary confusion. Shortly after that, we had another phone call where she told me she was keeping her distance because she was anxious about people in our program gossiping. At this point, I started to feel frustrated because it seemed she was evading providing me with a clear answer. If she was interested but worried about gossip, why not just address the matter directly? If she was not interested, why not simply state that instead of attributing the issue to external factors? After that conversation, she became less responsive, yet she still engaged just enough to keep me uncertain. If she wanted to end things, she could have stopped communicating altogether, but she did not. She continued to initiate interactions at times, and while it was not as intense as before, it was still sufficient to leave me questioning our situation. By the end of that month, I was overwhelmed by the mixed signals and decided to cut off contact to gain some clarity, as I had a lot on my plate with university and work. I figured if she was genuinely interested, she would reach out, but she did not address it. However, when I attended class, she kept staring at me, occasionally starting conversations and going out of her way to interact with me. If she truly wanted to end things, why was she still so fixated on me? It felt as though she was trying to keep me in her life without actually wanting to be with me. After about a month of no contact, she unexpectedly reached out with a message. Basically, I know we don't really talk anymore, and I completely respect any decision you make in that regard. But I enjoyed discussing things with you, and there's no hard feelings or anything, so I thought I could just say hi and chat. But I don't actually have anything to say, so don't worry about that. This message arrived more than a week before we finally met for coffee, which I suggested to explain why I had become distant, as I felt somewhat guilty for doing so. During this time, I also allowed myself to feel a bit hopeful about reconnecting with her and began interacting with her in the same manner as before, which, in hindsight, I should not have done. When we finally met for coffee, she confessed that there had been another guy throughout this entire period. She refused to reveal his identity, but implied it was somewhat obvious and that I had inadvertently interrupted them in group settings. This caught my attention because I had already suspected that someone else could be involved, but I was unsure how long he had been in the picture. I realized that if she did not want to tell me who he was, she probably understood that it would complicate matters further. If it was so obvious, why not just be straightforward about it? Instead, she spent all this time withholding that information while still keeping me close enough to prevent a complete cutoff. She acknowledged flirting with me, but she insisted she was merely exploring her appeal with various guys in our program because she had recently exited a relationship. During our meeting, I responded emotionally, yet I tried my best to maintain composure, as I had been reflecting on this a lot over the past months, but it seemed trivial to her. She said she mainly appreciated our closeness and valued our friendship, and some of the behaviors I interpreted as flirting, such as our long phone calls, were things she did with all her friends without any ulterior motives. She also mentioned that I had always treated her respectfully, even noting that I could have yelled at her, but I never did. That statement resonated with me because it felt as though she was attempting to relieve some sense of guilt, acknowledging that she had not managed the situation well, yet subtly positioning herself as the one with more control over everything. I could not shake the feeling that I had merely been a backup while she pursued this other guy the whole time. When I confronted her about this, she simply replied that she did not perceive it that way. I also ponder whether my lack of experience in relationships made me an easier target for mixed signals. More than anything, I want to ensure I never find myself in a situation like this again, as I feel somewhat pathetic for placing so much mental weight on something that hardly registered on her radar. I have been losing sleep and overthinking this, as the situation has highlighted many of my insecurities. I was almost certain she was interested, but it turns out, for her, it was of little consequence. Story 3. Aita polyamorous. Dropped the idea of considering poly relationships after a traumatic breakup and just stored it away in my head, but it's coming back to haunt me. I am using a throwaway account as I prefer not to have this traced back to me. I apologize for the lengthy post. Let me start with some basic information about myself. I am a 20-year-old male, diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. I am not certain if this is relevant. I learned about being polyamorous through a difficult experience. I ended up cheating on an ex before understanding what polyamory even meant at around 16 and have avoided such actions since. After that relationship, I resumed dating and met someone named S, who was a complex individual. However, I have never experienced such intense chemistry with anyone else, before or after her. I informed her that I identified as polyamorous because I believed it was important for her to know, but I made it clear that I had no intention of pursuing it actively. She was monogamous, and I fully understood her perspective, so I never pressed the issue. To my surprise, she encouraged me to express my sexuality freely, as she was not a jealous person. Our connection never progressed beyond a situationship. After suddenly ghosting me for 2 weeks, she returned to end things, explaining that she simply wasn't ready, and we were quite young. I was 17, she was 15. The legal age of consent in my country is 14 with no upper age limit, but I was not very aware of societal norms regarding consent laws at the time. I wanted to clarify the context, as a 2-year age gap was acceptable to me. Following that experience, I resolved not to settle for monogamous relationships again. She introduced me to a world I wish I had never discovered. I then met R, who was 17 at the time. I disclosed my polyamorous status immediately, and she was initially comfortable with it. We enjoyed a wonderful relationship until it ended. Suddenly, she appeared to be uncomfortable with the arrangement, though she failed to communicate her feelings to me. By the time she expressed her concerns, it was too late. I attempted suicide and was institutionalized for 2 weeks, experiencing multiple traumatic events during my stay that left me with a severe fear of hospitals. This incident occurred just 2 weeks after I turned 18 in January 2023. Despite the kindness she showed during our relationship, after it ended, R revealed a more malicious side, carefully choosing her words to inflict maximum pain. This continued for several months. She likely grew to resent me for the turmoil the situation caused her, despite never communicating her feelings to me until she was completely out of love. At that point, I decided to abandon any thoughts of polyamory because I was not prepared to endure another experience like that. I then fell into substance abuse. From May to October, I used cocaine 2 to 3 times a week. Although I did not develop a dependency on it, it led to an eating disorder that I continue to battle. I also began experimenting with other substances and became addicted to benzodiazepines, though I managed to overcome that addiction shortly after turning 19. I still consume drugs and have had 4 overdoses, with the most recent occurring in February 2024, following a scare in December. However, I have been careful to avoid falling back into addiction. As the withdrawal symptoms lingered for months, I want to specify that there is no fentanyl in what I use, and the substances are generally pure. In the worst case, they are diluted and of lower potency. Fast forward to now. I am in a relationship with G, who is an exceptionally kind, patient individual that loves me deeply. She is incredibly supportive, and even though I struggle in certain areas, primarily being physically present due to severe insomnia and difficulty waking up, she remains by my side. This battle has been ongoing since 2019 and spiraled out of control despite my efforts with various medications and therapies. I had to drop out of school, cannot maintain a job, and find it challenging to make plans with someone who does not live nearby and has a busier schedule. Now, on to the issue at hand. I have not encountered significant difficulties maintaining a monogamous relationship and have no intentions of pursuing anything else after my previous experience. It took nearly 2 years to move past R, and although I still occasionally struggle with memories of our time together, I now find her repugnant. I previously mentioned the chemistry I experienced with S, which leads to the current relevance of this situation. Recently, I received a follow request from a private account. I accepted without any thoughts. Shortly after, as I scrolled through stories, there she was. I have not cried since my relationship with R, but at that moment, my stomach dropped. I love G immensely and would not trade her for anything, yet I find myself missing S in a way that I cannot comprehend. I am unsure how to navigate this. I have never truly struggled with reverting to monogamy until now, and G would never accept any alternative. Once again, I am also not interested in any other arrangement, yet this predicament is tormenting me. I wish I could erase all memories prior to Jitike's presence in my life. I know she does not deserve this dilemma, and if that were not enough, I carry a constant sense of guilt. The only respite I find is in hard drugs, which I should note I rarely use more than once or twice a week, if at all. I can go without for weeks and do not buy them anymore, aside from occasional lean, and am in no danger of addiction. I understand better than to seek them as a means of numbing my pain, but they inadvertently do have that effect when I consume them. If you have read until this point, I sincerely appreciate your time. I apologize if I have wandered off topic or if my grammar has faltered. I am feeling utterly distressed, and I wish for all of this to vanish. While posting here may not resolve the issues I face, perhaps someone might find the right words to comfort me, or even just sharing my thoughts will help bring me some peace. I am not ready to discuss this with my therapist at the moment, and am currently preoccupied with resolving some family issues, so I will not have the opportunity to do so until those are sorted out.